Hello everyone. So welcome to the verbal solutions of CAT 23 slot 2. I am Siddharth Mehta and I will be discussing the solutions for the verbal 8 verbal questions. So here is our first question of slot 2 verbal, and this is on para completion, where one paragraph is given to you and you are supposed to fill up the sentence at the right place. All right. So let us look at the question. Just a minute. Yeah. So this is the first question, and this is the given sentence, and we are supposed to tell that out of 1, 2, 3, 4, which blank will this sentence fit into. So let us see what the sentence is about. So first thing to do is in para completion is to read the sentence properly and try to get the hint that what can lie before or after this sentence. So what is given here is, and probably much earlier, moving the documentation for kissing back 1,000 years compared to what was acknowledged in the scientific community. So this looks a very incomplete sentence, right? Subject has already been talked about. So this can't be the opening sentence of the entire passage. Anyways, there is no blank in the at the opening place. So the hint that I get from this sentence is it should precede with something which talks about time. Why? Because see what is talk with what this sentence is, and probably much earlier. That means some sort of time reference would have been there in the previous sentence, and then this sentence continues that and probably much earlier. Then what it talks about, and probably much earlier, moving the documentation for kissing 1,000 years back compared to what was acknowledged in the scientific community. The second thing that I can think of is that perhaps something related to scientific community and of course the view of scientific community on the kissing when kissing started, that must have been discussed before this, right? So these are the two things that I keep in mind. And let me start reading the paragraph. Research has hypothesized that earliest evidence for human kissing originated in very specific geographical location in South Asia 3,500 years ago. Yeah, so time reference is here. So that way, looking at the given sentence, one may be a possible answer. But let me read the complete passage. From there, it may have spread to other regions, simultaneously accelerating the spread of the herb simplex virus 1. According to Dr. Stroel Sprang, whatever the name is, and Dr. Sophie Lund Rasmussen, who in new article in the journal Science drawn a range of written sources from the earliest Mesopotamian society, kissing was already a well-established practice 4,500 years ago in the Middle East. So here he talks about 3,500. Here he talks about 4,500. Some hint that 1,000 years back is given in the sentence. In ancient Mesopotamia, people wrote in cuneiform script on clay tablets, then blank. Many thousands of these clay tablets. So two things, it cannot come in three because of two reasons. Why it cannot come in three? Because if you see, the sentence which precedes three doesn't have any time reference. The second one, just following three is many thousands of these clay tablets. So when we are talking about these clay tablets, means the sentence before this should talk about clay tablet. And if I put the given sentence at position number three, then that goes missing. So three can't be the answer. I'm ruling out this. Then I go ahead and see that they contain clear examples that kissing was considered a part of romantic intimacy in ancient times. Dash kissing could also have been part of friendship. Once again, 4 doesn't look like the possibility because of again the same reason. There is no time reference. Plus, it looks the continuation. Here it talks about it was considered a part of romantic intimacy and could also have been part of friendship and family members relation. So 3 and 4 gone. I have to evaluate between 1 and 2 only, right? So let me go back and see what looks like a good choice. So first, let me again restart reading. Research has hypothesized that earliest evidence of human lip kissing originated in a very specific geographical location in South Asia 3,500 years ago. From there, it may have spread to other regions. This looks a very good continuation, isn't it? From there, from where? From the specific geographical location in South Asia, it may have spread to other regions. This looks a very good continuation. So in all likelihood, A doesn't look the possible answer. Let me read and say why 2 looks a better choice. So he talks about that from there it is spread to other region. Then names of two scientists are given. And they say, and the article says, who in a new article in the journal Science drawn a range of written sources from the earliest Mesopotamian societies. Kissing was already a well-established practice 4,500 years ago in the Middle Age. So what the passage is now saying is that it was hypothesized, it was believed that it started 3,500 years ago, but the new article in the journal Science says that it may have started 4,500 years ago in the Middle East, right? And because of these two things, this sentence comes it at position 2, which now sort of summarizes whatever has happened till this time, and probably much earlier, means moving the documentation for kissing 1,000 years back compared to what was acknowledged in the scientific community. So from 3,500 years to 4,500 years. So this has moved the documentation to 1,000 years compared to what was acknowledged. So 2 looks a good choice. 1 is not a good choice if because in the at the either side of blank 1, the sentences looks good in continuation, right? Option number 2 is the best choice. That's the right answer. Right. Now this is para completion number 2. Let us look what it is about. Sentences: dualism was long held as the defining feature of developing countries in contrast to developed countries, where frontier technologies and high productivities were assumed to prevail. So it talks about dualism and what was believed. Looks a very good opening statement, right? So introduction sort of dualism, and it was long held as a defining feature of developing countries in contrast to developed countries. So there is some contrast been given, and it talks about how developed countries were had high productivity. So these 2 3 things are given. I will keep this in mind. So blank 1 looks a good thing. I mean, a good place to start because of the sort of sentence it is, right? So let me read. Dualism was long held as the defining feature of developing countries in contrast to developed countries, where frontier technologies and high productivity were assumed to prevail. At the core of development economics lies the idea of productive dualism, that poor countries' economies are split between a narrow modern sector that uses advanced technologies and a larger traditional sector characterized by very low productivity. The problem is, if I keep it in 1, this low opening anyways looks perfect, right? This opening anyways looks perfect. It says that at the core of developmental economics lies the idea of productive dualism. So this looks a better introduction of dualism rather than the given sentence, which actually talks about this. This also is a good introductory statement, but now if I look closely, the given sentence in the paragraph, the opening sentence in the given paragraph, at the core lies the idea of productive dualism. This defines what is productive dualism. And the sentence number 2 will follow it, which says that it was long held as the feature of developing countries in contrast to developed countries, right? So it can come here. Let me see what follows. While this distinction between developing and advanced economies, now this gives me a very strong hint that before this line, there must be distinction or talk about developed countries and developing countries, and the given sentence has talked about it. So very strong chance that it comes into position number 2, right? Because while this distinction gives me the hint, so there must be some distinction which the given sentence has. So out of 1 and 2, 2 looks a better choice. But let us read so that we can see whether 3 and 4 comes into picture at all. So while this distinction between developing and advanced economies may have made some sense in 1950s and 1960s, it no longer appear to be very relevant. So he says that so he is now saying that this contrast is no more relevant. So why? The reasons are here. A combination of forces have produced a widening gap between the winners and those left behind. Convergence between poor and rich parts of the economy was arrested and regional disparities widened. So these 2 given sentences looks good in continuation. They are said, both the sentences are talking about widening gap, and this is the consequence. As a result, policymakers in advanced economies are now grappling with the same question. So now this he is talking about the present tense, what is happening in the developing economies, and the given sentence is about the past tense. It was long held, right? So 3 and 4 doesn't look a good choice. So right answer is option number two, right? So I hope you have got the two solutions. And how to look at the para completion is just look at, read the given sentence properly, try to build that what could precede, what could follow the given sentence. That will help you. The words like this, that, they are always helpful in the para completion or para jumbles, or the verbal section of the English, right? So let us now look at the other solutions. All right, so here is the discussion on the odd sentence questions. Usually, students do find it difficult, and yes, also I find it difficult. So, let us see what this question was about. So, there were five sentences that were given, and the four of them form the part of a coherent paragraph, and the one is the odd one. So, you have to identify the odd one. And this question made a re-entry into the CAT 23 after CAT 21. It was a regular feature till CAT 21, but CAT 22 did not have this question. And some students committed the mistake of not reading the options, and they went behind arranging these five sentences into the para jumble sort of question. Okay, so that was the mistake that the students committed. So read the instruction properly. Now let us start the question. Okay, so the first thing to do in such type of odd sentence question is to read the five sentences, of course, and try to identify that which two or three of them would be definitely there as a part of the story. Now, what happens? There is some story. Story doesn't mean the necessary, fictional story. Some idea in the form of a story you can think of that has been given. The bad part about it is that all the sentences will talk about the same subject, so that creates confusion. All the five sentences will look to talk about the same thing, but one of these sentences will be bit off track. I mean, it will talk about the same thing, but it will take the entire discussion into some other direction, and there won't be any linking words or anything which will shift the flow to some other direction. So we need to look at this, that what are the majority of the sentences talking about, what is the direction of the majority of the sentences. There may lie the hint if we can do that. So let us see. The banning of Northern Lights could be considered a precursor to censoring books for moral, worldview, or religious reasons. Attempts to ban books are attempt to silence authors who have summoned up immense courage to telling their stories. Now the banning and challenging of books in US has escalated to an unprecedented level. The widely acclaimed fantasy novel Northern Lights was banned in some parts of the US and was the second most challenged book in the US. The American Library Association documented an unparalleled number of reported back challenges 2022, about 2,500 unique titles. The problem here is, as I said, the subject is same. Banning the books, that's the subject. All the five sentences are talking about the same thing, but now we need to read it properly, try to see that what are the sentences that will be compulsory, that are together. So if I can identify two sentences that are together, they cannot be the answer, right? So the banning of Northern Lines could be considered a precursor to censoring books for moral, worldview, or religious reasons. Okay, attempts to ban books are attempt to silence authors who have summoned immense courage in telling their story. Now the banning and challenging books in US has escalated to an unprecedented level. The widely acclaimed fantasy novel Northern Lights was banned in some part of US. Now look at this. Now, if I read 1 and 3, one could be the good opening statement, but what follow next will be, in that case, the talk about Northern Lights only. But here we see that talk is about banning the book, and Northern Light is perhaps used as an example that it has been banned. Now, if it has been used as an example, 4 will introduce the Northern Lights. 4 says that there is an acclaimed book called Northern Lights, and it was banned in some part of the US and was the second most challenged book in the US. So out of 4 and 1, 4 definitely looks the part of the sentence. 1 may follow it, but let us read the fifth one. The American Library Association documented an unparalleled number of recorded challenges. So now you look at 3 and 5 together. They are together. Look what 3 was saying. Now the banning and challenging of books in US has escalated to unprecedented level. It has gone high. Look what 5 is saying. 5 is giving the specifics of that Library Association documented an unparalleled number of reported books challenged in 2022. So very likely that 3 and 5 are together. So if I read, It says that now the banning and challenges of books in US has escalated to unprecedented level. The American Library Association documented this many number of book challenges, general. Then it will go down to the specific. Talking about a given example, the widely acclaimed fantasy novel was banned in some part of the US and was the second most challenged book in US. Good. 354. Now out of 1 and 2, look what 2 is talking about. It's a very general statement. So when I have gone from general to specific, I have already talked about two general statements. I have gone down to specific. It is very unlikely that two will follow it. Now, you can argue that it can start with two, but if it starts with two, that sentence number two has all the things correct till this year. Attempts to ban books are fine. To silence author, I can also say this. But this part is not at all being discussed in the paragraph. So very likely that 2 is not the part of the sequence. So what I feel like is that it should be 3, 5, 4, 1. I can be wrong in my order, right? 1 or 4 can be here and there, but at least both of them are talking about banning the northern lights, but 4 should anyways come before 1. So this looks the possible answer. 3, the answer should be option number 2, which is of course right as per the cat answer key also. And this was not very difficult because, as I said, identify identify which of the sentence is taking the discussion into some other direction. Now, this sentence number 2 is taking the discussion in some other direction and it has no link with any other sentence. The direction that it is taking is that it is an attempt to silence authors. And and the authors are someone who have immense courage in telling their story. But 1, 3, 4, 5 doesn't talk about silencing the author or the courage or some sort of oppressing the authors. Nothing has been talked about. So 2 is something which takes the discussion in a different direction altogether. Discussion is weird here. Weird, I should say. It weird means it is going into some other direction. Right answer is option number 2. Next odd sentence. All right. So let us again read. Self-care particularly links to loneliness, behavioral problems, and negative academic outcomes. So looks a good opening. Latchkey children refers to children who routinely return home from school to empty homes and take care of themselves for extended period of time. It defines what latchkey children are. Although self-care generally points to negative outcomes, it is important to consider that bulk of research has yet to track long-term consequences. I mean, look at 1 and 2. So 1 and 2 are not talking about any research as such till this point. Now, but 4 does talk about in research and practice, the phrase children in self-care has come to replace latchkey in an effort to more accurately reflect the nature of their circumstances. Word research is used here, but it is used in a different sense, different reference. In research and practice means when people are writing the paper or when in the wide usage. Right? So usage wise, the latchkey has been replaced by children in self-care. So 2 and 4 looks a very good together mandatory pair kind of a statement, wherein 2 talks about the latchkey children refers to those who routinely return home, means they return home and there is nobody to take care. I mean, they take care of themselves for extended period of time. And 4 goes on to say that now in research and practice, the term is being replaced by self-care. So now latchkey is tada bye-bye and self-care is being used. Let us see what does 5 talk about. Although parents might believe that self-care would be beneficial for development, research has found a quite opposite. Okay, here also research has been talked about, so maybe 5 and 3 can be linked, but it looks certain that 2 and 4 are definitely part of the paragraph, so they won't be, these two won't be the answer. Out of the remaining, if I look at 2 and 4 together, 4 talks about the phrase self-care has come to replace latchkey in an effort to more accurately reflect the nature of their circumstances. Right. So 2 and 4 together, what will follow next? Let me read all the sentences again. Self-care particularly links to loneliness, behavioral problem, and negative outcomes. So self-care, meaning of self-care, all things negative being talked about. Okay. Although self-care generally points to negative outcomes, looks good choice till here, it is important to consider that the bulk of research has yet to track long-term consequences. So before this, if I keep this in the part, if I keep this in the paragraph, there must be talk about research. So if there has to be talk about research, then one can't be there. Five and three will come. But if five and three come, but if 5 and 3 come, this very important linking statement, or telling me what is negative about self-care, which 5 talks about, goes missing, right? So very unlikely. 3 is talking about something which is again taking the discussion into some other direction. So far, out of all the 5 statements, the 4 statements were pretty much concrete in nature. Question, the statement number 3, it is raising doubt on negative outcomes of self-care. No hint was given there. So very likely that 3 is not the right answer. Look at 5 and 1 together. So 5 says that although parents might believe that self-care would be beneficial, right? So why they would believe self-care is beneficial? Because the students take the children take care of themselves for extended period of time. So it says that parents might believe that it is beneficial, but research has found the quite opposite, but it is not beneficial. How is it not beneficial? It goes to 1 and says that it is not beneficial because it is linking to these things. So 1 looks like the explanation, or a negative impact example of self care. So 2451 is looks a good paragraph. 3, as I said, if I bring it, it again raises the doubt on the entire thing. But no remaining sentence has any hint which says that self-care, which raises the doubt on the findings of the research or something of that sort. So a tricky question, maybe, but once again, if you stick to the same thing, you see the subject in all the 5 sentences will be same, but there will be one sentence which takes the discussion in some other direction, and no other sentence talk in that direction, right? So that is why right answer here is option number 3. Right, so let us discuss the most difficult part of the verbal para-jumble. So here the 4 sentences are given and we need to arrange them. Let us see the things that I look for are the first the thing, the pronouns, because the pronouns help me to understand what can precede this sentence. Okay, so that helps me to identify which of the 2 sentences can be together. So let us read. Contemporary African writing like the bottle leopard voices this theme using 2 children and 2 backgrounds to juxtapose 2 varying cultures. So this cannot be the opening because it talks about this theme. So before this should come something which has a theme in it. So contemporary African writing like the bottle leopard voices the theme using 2 children and 2 backgrounds to juxtapose 2 varying cultures. Now, if this if this is not the opening sentence, very likely this is example of something, right? And it says about it voices this theme using 2 children and 2 backgrounds. So this is an example of something. Examples usually come towards the end. Let us read the second sentence. Chukwe Mika, I don't know, explores the conflict and cast the Western tradition as condescending, enveloping, and unaccommodating towards local African practice. Before this statement, because it is the conflict, right? So the conflict means some sort of conflict could have been talked about, but I'm not very sure. Usually that's how the articles work, but sometimes in cat they give weird answer and cast the Western tradition. So this particular author, she or he explores the conflict and cast the Western tradition as condescending, enveloping, and unaccommodating. Highly likely that before this a conflict will come, and then goes on to say that this particular author has explored this conflict and the way the Western tradition has been cast. Next, third, however, their views contradict the reality. So definitely this is not the opening sentence. So in all likelihood, 4 is the opening sentence. Western Christian concepts tend to deny or feign ignorance about the existence of genuine and enduring indigenous African tradition. 4 looks the good opening. It talks about that what Western Christian concept do. They tend to deny or feign ignorance about the existence of a genuine and enduring indigenous African tradition. Basically, Western Christian concept, they deny that there is something, anything indigenous about African tradition. They deny the existence of indigenous African tradition. Now 3 talks about their views. Now their views can only be of Western Christians, because in no other sentence, 1 or 2, there is anything which can hint to their views. So I can say that 4 and 3 are together. Let me read 4 and 3. 4 I've already read. It talks about Western Christian ignoring the indigenous African tradition. And then 3 talks about their views contradict the reality. Now it contradicts the reality. 2 talked about conflict. 1 looked like a good ending statement. So 4, 3, 2, 1 looks a very good choice. And that also is the right answer. So relatively easier question. The hint came with this word their view. The hint came with this theme. And the hint also came with the explore the conflict, right? It explore the conflict. So there must be some conflict before this. Now, if you read the entire story, it talks about that Western Christian denies anything which is indigenous to African tradition, then goes on to 3 statements, says that this contradicts the reality. Then there is talk about one particular author who has exposed this, explored this conflict, and the example of that particular book in which that conflict may have been explored is being talked about. So 4, 3, 2, 1. Next question. Now, this is something that I got wrong in the CAT, and I can give you my logic for why my answer is right. I will also give you the logic of why CAT thinks that their answer is right. But let me first talk about the given question. Like the ants that make up a colony, no single neuron holds complex information like self-awareness, hope, or pride. So no single neuron holds a complex information like this. Although the human brain is not yet understood enough to identify the mechanism by which emergence functions, most neurologists agree that complex interconnection among the parts give rise to qualities that belong only to whole. Okay. Nonetheless, the sum of all neurons in the nervous system generate complex human emotions like fear and joy, none of which can be attributed to a single neuron. So 1 and 3, they talk about the same thing, right? So 1 also talks about that no single neuron holds complex information. 3 also talks about the sum of all neurons in the nervous system generate a complex nervous system, a complex human emotions, and none of which can be attributed to single neuron. So 1, 3 in any order right now. We will see that later. We'll be together. Human consciousness is often called an emergent property of the human brain. If I read now, this looks a very good opening statement. 4. 4 talks about human consciousness is often called an emergent property of human behavior. So this is an emergent property. Now, emergent property is being talked about here also. So according to me, 4 and 2 should be together, right? So let us see. Let us read 4 and 2. Human consciousness is often called an emergent property of the human brain. Although human brain is not yet fully understood enough to identify the mechanism by which emergence functions. So it is often called as emergent property, and it is too complex for now. It is too complex for us to say that how this emergence functions. We cannot say that. But most biologists agree that complex interconnections among the part give rise to qualities that belong only to the whole. So we do not know how this functions, but most of the neurobiologists agree that the complex interconnection is there, which gives rise to the part of belonging to the whole. Now, one should follow, according to me. Like the ants that make up a colony, this just looks like an analogy. So a single ant does not make a colony. Like all the ants that make up a colony, no single neuron can have the complete and complex information. And then 3 will follow. Nonetheless, the sum of all neurons generate complex human emotions. So no single neuron is single neuron can have hold the complex information, but sum of all is important. So 4, 2, 1, 3 is my answer. I cannot believe that there can be any other answer other than this. However, CAT has picked up from a source. Now, if you read that source, you can agree with their answer. This is the source. This is the source, and this is the paragraph that they have picked up. This is the paragraph they have picked up, right? So what happens in this particular, if you read properly, if you have time, you can stop and read. What is being talked about is, that in this particular article, emergent properties has been discussed in the first place. So emergent property has been introduced. Then the AND system has been talked about, that how they accomplish a complex task, that has been talked about. And then it comes to the human consciousness. So emergent property, ant colonies, and human brain. Now, if here I compare human brain to ants, that is perfectly okay, because in this particular article, it has already been talked about. But CAT has only given us this much portion. So if I have to apply my logic, if I have to apply my logic, this only looks as an analogy in the given cat question. This at best looks like an analogy. I cannot say that this is part of the story because nothing in that paragraph talks about it. If I read the complete article, then I can say that it is okay. I mean, if I read this article, human consciousness is often called an emergent property of the human brain. Emergent property already being talked about. Like the ants that make up a colony, no single neuron holds the complex information. This again has been talked about here. So it makes perfect sense. Now the answer that they have given is 4132. So 4132 is this. So 4 is it starts with this. Like the ants that make up a colony, perfectly fine because that has already been discussed in the article. That weight is right. And then 3 2. So 1 and 3 anyways were together. So this is what they have talked about. But I believe that if I go by the logic and forget about any article, I don't know from where they have picked. They can pick and give it from between, but you need to give me the context also then. So they have not given that context. According to me, with this 4 statement, this should be the right answer. However, Cat has given 4132 as the right answer, and I have told you the reason they have given 4132 as the right answer because this is the article. They have not thought much behind it. They have simply given it. So it's up to you to look and say what will be right, what will be wrong. So that is it from my side. Thank you. All right, so let us discuss the para summary question, usually the easier part of the verbal, the para summary question. So let me tell you what I look for in the para summary questions. So what I look for is, of course, what is the paragraph talking about? That is the subject of the paragraph, and what is author's opinion about that particular subject. My answer should encapsulate these two, right? So, what the paragraph is about and what is the author's main opinion about that. So, let us read. People spontaneously create counterfactual alternatives to reality when they think if only or what if, and imagine how the past could have been different. The mind computes counterfactuals for many reasons. Counterfactuals explain the past and prepare for the future. They implicate various relations, including the causal ones, and they affect intentions and decision. They modulate emotions such as regret and relief, and they support moral judgment such as blame. The ability to create counterfactual develops throughout childhood and contributes to reasoning about others people believe, including their false belief. So, what is the passage about? Passage is about counterfactuals. What are counterfactuals? Counterfactuals are something which, of course, this is talked about. I mean, this is given in the passage that the counterfactual is something when we think if only or what if. We go into past and we start thinking that what if that wouldn't have happened with me, or what if that would have happened with me, what could have been the course of my life, that kind of thing. So we all have habit of creating counterfactual. And then author says we do it for many reasons, and these are the reasons why we do it, because it helps us in doing this thing. Now these kind of sentences are less relevant. Why? Because he has already told you that I am giving you the reasons that why our mind create counterfactuals. So my answer should have this. Then he goes on to say, now where does it change? It changes in the last line. The ability to create counterfactuals develops throughout the childhood. All right, till before this line, from here counterfactuals explain till this point, there are several reasons about what is the role of counterfactual, right? But here now the narrative changes to something else. He talks about that it is ability to create counterfactual develops throughout the childhood and it contributes to reasoning. So he has talked about development, and development is throughout the childhood. Let me see if any answer fits in and gets all three of these things into it. So first is counterfactual helps people to prepare for the future by understanding intentions and making decisions. Absolutely right, given in the passage, but this is not the summary. This is one of the reasons that has been given in the passage. So never mark something which is given in the passage as one of the reason. You have to mark something which is the summary. Please understand. That is why people get confused. They believe that all the things are mentioned. Counterfactual thinking helps to reverse past and future decision and reason out false belief. Now, this may again look possible, but once again, it is a reason that is given, right? That how counterfactual helps. You have to sum up. You have to tell me that give me the answer that talks about how counterfactuals are helpful. That's it. Okay. People create counterfactual alternatives to reality for various reasons. Perfect so far, including reasoning about other people's belief. Good choice, but I will never mark an option which, see, if there are 5 reasons being given, I will never mark an option which talks only about one reason. This already sums up. The first part already sums up that there are several reasons. Why would I illustrate one? That's not a good summary. But I will say that if 4 is not good, I will mark this. At least out of 1, 2, and 3, 3 looks a better choice. 4. Counterfactual alternatives to reality are created for a variety of reasons and is part of one's development process. Perfect. This should be the answer. Right? So some people might have marked this option number 3, but please understand this is repetition, right? Including reasoning about others people's belief is repetition of various reasons. If I have to repeat, I will repeat all 5. But if I repeat all 5, then entire paragraph will get written. Why will I give my bias towards reasoning about others people's belief? That is a bias that I am taking now. It is one of the several reasons. I can't take only one reason's name. So answer is option number 4. Let us look at the next question, the last question of the verbal. So it talks about heat waves are becoming longer, frequent, and intense due to climate change. The impact of extreme heat are unevenly experienced with older people and young children, those with pre-existing medical condition and on low income significantly more vulnerable. Adaptation to heat waves is a significant public policy concern. Research conducted among at-risk people in UK reveals that even vulnerable people do not perceive themselves as at risk of extreme heat. Therefore, early warnings of extreme heat events do not perform as intended. Okay, this suggests that understanding how extreme heat is narrated is very important. The news media plays a central role in this process and can help warn people about the potential danger as well as about the impacts of infrastructure and society. So the passage is about heat wave. It talks about that there are few people who are vulnerable, more vulnerable than the others. Then it goes on to say that even these vulnerable people, they do not perceive it as a threat. So vulnerable people not perceiving it as a threat. And then author goes on to say that whatever warning signals we have are not performing well. So warning signals not performing well. This is important. Not performing well. Okay. Then he goes on to say that media not performing well. Then in the last line, he says that media will play a crucial role. So media playing a crucial role. Media is important. Let us see what the 4 sentences talk about. Heat waves pose an enormous risk. The media plays a pivotal role in alerting people to this danger. Looks a decent choice. There is nothing wrong about it. People are vulnerable to heat waves caused due to climate change. Measures taken are ineffective. Measures taken are ineffective. This looks bit extreme. Plus the first part, people are vulnerable to heat waves. Not all people are vulnerable. Paragraph clearly talks that a section of people is more vulnerable, and even they are not, they are not believing that it is a threat. So out of 1 and 2, 1 looks a better choice. Let us go to 3. Protection from heat waves is important, but current reports and public policies seem ineffective. He has not talked about reports being ineffective. Once again, bit extreme, right? Not the right answer. News story help in warning about heat waves, but they have to become more effective. This definitely can't be the answer because he has not said that news stories are not effective. He simply said that news stories play a crucial role. Whether they are effective right now or not cannot be the answer. So look at this. 1 looks the best choice. It talks about that they pose an enormous risk. Of course, there is a section of vulnerable people that is not discussed, but that is not given in the in any of the 4 sentences. So if it is not given in the any of the 4 sentences, then let me say that this is not part of the summary. All right. Heat wave pose an enormous risk. Yeah, that is being talked about, and it has also been talked about that media is playing will play an important role. 2, 3, and 4. Because of these words, ineffective, I am ruling them out. Answer is option number 1. Right. So that is it for the verbal part. Remember, in the para summary question, the important thing is what is the subject and what is the author's judgment on that subject. All right. So that is it.